the boy who saved the day with common sense. In the vast, sun-baked plains of Kenya, where the Maasai people have roamed for centuries, there was a small village nestled at the base of the Ngong Hills. This village, known as Ol Kalu, was home to a close-knit community of Maasai people who lived in harmony with nature, herding cattle and maintaining their traditions. Among them was a young boy named Nyaj, whose name meant peace in the Maasai language. Nyaj, though just 14 years old, was known for his quiet wisdom. He was not the fastest runner, nor the strongest hunter, but there was something special about how he saw the world. He could solve problems in ways that others overlooked, simply because he understood the land and people better than anyone else. It was on a bright morning when the village's peace was shattered by a crisis. A terrible drought had swept across the region, leaving the land dry and cracked. The rivers, once full of water, had become nothing but shallow streams, and the cattle were beginning to suffer. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon, as the elders gathered around the fire in the heart of the village, a deep rumble echoed across the horizon. It was the sound of an approaching herd of wildebeest. Thousands of them, their hooves beating the earth, were on their way toward the village, and they were headed straight for the dried-up riverbed. It wasn't the wildebeest themselves that caused fear, but the stampede that would soon follow. The village elders, who had lived through many such events, knew that the stampede could destroy their homes, trample their crops, and even hurt the children. The men rushed to prepare, shouting commands and gathering their weapons. The women and children were ushered to the safety of the hills. But in the middle of the chaos, Nyaj stayed calm. He observed the situation, watching the horizon carefully. He noticed something that others hadn't. The wildebeest weren't just aimlessly wandering. They were moving in a specific direction, and it wasn't toward the village, but rather toward the dry riverbed where the last of the water had pooled. As the village leaders scrambled to find a solution, Nyaj spoke up. His voice, though young, carried a sense of authority that commanded the attention of everyone in the village. "The wildebeest are headed to the riverbed," he said. "We cannot stop them from reaching the water, but if we don't act quickly, they will stampede when they find no water. They will panic, and the stampede will destroy our homes." The elders listened carefully. Most of them were skeptical at first. How could a boy of 14 offer a solution to such a grave problem? But Nyaj's steady gaze told them he had seen something they had not. "There is a way we can stop the stampede," Nyaj continued, his voice calm. "We need to divert them from the riverbed before they get there. But we must act fast." The elders gathered around, intrigued by Nyaj's words. "What do you suggest?" one of them asked. "Let's use the land," Nyaj replied simply. "The wildebeest are creatures of habit, and they follow certain patterns. If we can create a barrier, an obstacle, they will be forced to change their path." Without waiting for any further instructions, Nyaj sprang into action. He ran to the edge of the village, where the landscape was dotted with thorny acacia trees, dense bushes, and large rocks. He gathered a group of young boys and girls, and together they began to work quickly. They didn't need fancy tools or advanced techniques. Instead, Nyaj instructed the children and teenagers to use what was readily available: branches, thorny bushes, and stones. They began to form a series of low barriers along the path the wildebeest were most likely to take. The goal wasn't to block the animals entirely, but to guide them toward an alternate route, one that would lead them away from the village. The older men, who had initially dismissed Nyaj's idea, now joined in, realizing the wisdom in his plan. They too began to help by driving the cattle further away from the riverbed, creating an additional barrier of sound and movement to steer the wildebeest in a new direction. Hours passed, and the thunderous sound of the wildebeest grew louder. But by the time the herd reached the village, Nyaj and his team had created a path that led the animals around the village and toward a rocky outcrop. The wildebeest hesitated for a moment, confused by the unfamiliar terrain, but they soon followed the new path that had been laid out before them. As the last of the wildebeest moved past, the village erupted in a collective sigh of relief. The danger of a stampede had been averted, and the village remained intact. The elders gathered around Nyaj, their faces filled with gratitude and awe. "You have saved us," one of the elders said, his voice thick with emotion. "We would have been lost without your wisdom." Nige, ever humble, simply shrugged. "I didn't do anything special. I just listened to the land. The animals know the way. They just need someone to show them." The next day, as the sun set over the village, the elders gathered again around the fire. This time, however, the conversation was different. They spoke not just of the dangers the village had faced, but of the quiet strength that had saved them. Nige's ability to use common sense, to understand the natural world and its patterns, had made all the difference. From that day forward, Nige was no longer just a boy in the village. He was seen as a young leader, someone whose wisdom went beyond age and experience. And as he grew older, his name became synonymous with peace and clarity. A boy who had saved the day not with weapons, but with his keen mind and deep understanding of the world around him. In the years that followed, Nige's story was passed down from generation to generation. A reminder that sometimes the simplest solution, a solution born from common sense, is the one that makes all the difference. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more interesting videos and to help the channel grow. Thanks.